4 is less than 5. And in a game like Wuthering Waves, less is not more. With lowered base stats, lower scaling, and lower overall damage than their 5-star counterparts, 4-star characters are an unfortunate byproduct of the gacha system. How can you make your limited characters worth more unless you have something worse to compare them to? The end result of this design philosophy is that you have some characters that perform a lot better than others in almost every circumstance, and this oftentimes has players wondering whether or not these 4-star characters are ever worth investing in. With the limited amount of resources available combined with the hefty cost of upgrading characters, they can find themselves in a difficult situation where they have to pick and choose who gets priority, knowing that someone else on their account is going to get ignored. And oftentimes, these 4-star characters are the ones getting the short end of the stick. With the recent announcement of a new 4-star entering the roster, many are wondering if this character will even be worth investing in. While these characters are far easier to get multiple copies for, with their increased gacha rates on rate-up banners, their performance, even at max rank, oftentimes pales in comparison to their 5-star alternatives, across every type of role imaginable. There's no problem at all with more expensive characters having better performance, but this gap is wide, and it extends beyond performance on the battlefield. Today we'll be discussing why this is the case, breaking down the power level of 4-star characters, not just from a combat perspective, but from an account building one as well. 4-star characters inherently have many disadvantages when compared to their 5-star peers, and these disadvantages can oftentimes cause massive problems with the player's progression, especially as they begin tackling endgame content like the Tower of Adversity. 4-star characters, much like their 5-star alternatives, are split across 3 main roles across their teams. The supports, who shield and heal while also providing general buffs, the sub-DPS characters that specifically grant damage boosts and off-field damage, and the main DPS characters, those who take up a majority of field time and deal the most damage on the team. Among these 3 categories, there's one in particular that's easily the most useless when we think of 4-stars, and that's the main DPS. 4-star characters come with a lot of disadvantages that make their performance as a main DPS less than ideal. Every percentage stat boost in the game, be it from your echoes or your team's buffs, will simply have less of an impact on a 4-star character. That's because all of these buffs calculate off your base attack, and 4-stars have less compared to their competition. When your main DPS is also the one benefiting from most of the buffs across team rotations, like those from Moonlit Cloud or the outro skills of your teammates, this has a huge impact across your damage that immediately limits the potential of every 4-star character. And with how high base attacks can rise as a character reaches level 90, there's only more and more value lost as you invest more into a character. This feeling sucks, and when you consider the massive amount of time and time-gated resources that it takes to get these characters maxed, it can feel like all of their investments have been wasted, especially when they pull their 5-star alternative with the same attribute. Sunk costs, specifically in gacha games, don't feel great, and players will oftentimes come to the conclusion that building these 4-star main DPSs are never worth it, because an existing character will do the job better, or there's a new one on the horizon that will take their role in the future. Fortunately, if you have built up an amazing attribute damage set for a 4-star DPS, it can likely be transferred to a new character with minimal loss. Thankfully, this 4-star DPS dynamic is something we haven't experienced very much of across Wuthering Waves. This is because there's only one 4-star main DPS across the entire roster, and that unfortunate title belongs to Chisha. We can only hope it doesn't spread to new releases. However, characters like Danjin are frequently played as a main DPS, but that's not the only role that she serves on teams. Her outro skill, along with those of many others, has her lean into more of a sub-DPS role on other teams, and that role has far more longevity than a main DPS. This is for a few reasons. First, sub-DPS 4-stars don't need as much investment compared to main DPSs to perform on their teams. Outro skills, despite their incredible strength, don't scale at all with the character's stats or levels. You can't upgrade these outro skills on a tree, and they have their full power from level 1. They instead scale with the strength of your main DPS, and what this means is that you can funnel those those resources you'd spend leveling and upgrading a sub DPS character's skills into those of your main DPSs instead. This naturally makes these characters a lot more affordable to build, specifically from a leveling perspective. This also makes them a lot easier to build when it comes to their equipment and echoes. With less of a focus on their personal damage and more focus on their buffing capability, these characters can easily get by on the Moonlit Clouds echo set and a Concerto energy generation weapon. And with these weapons and echoes also shareable across the endgame, what this all means is that 4-star sub DPS characters can get the job done with minimal investment. This is great, not just because it makes the leveling and gearing process for your teams a lot easier, but because it makes upgrading from these sub DPS characters far less painful in the long run. This is because the 5-star sub DPS characters and buffers we've seen completely blow the 4-stars out of the water on their best teams. With the outro skill buffs of Yinlin and Chang Li's compared to those of Alto or Dan Jin, it's clear that some of these buffs are a lot stronger than others. With incredible personal damage as well, these characters are oftentimes a strict upgrade over their 4-star counterparts. However, due to the specialized nature of these buffs, like Yinlin and Chang Li boosting Resonance Liberation damage, the current cast of 4-star sub DPS characters are actually better suited as general buffers, giving them some advantage over their 5-star peers. In my opinion, that's fantastic design. Unfortunately, there is a third category of 4-star characters who lie somewhere in the middle when it comes to their long-term value, and that's the sustain characters. Sustain characters have some complications to them. They require a baseline level of investment to function properly, but pretty much all of them are strictly worse than Verena in almost every single way, with slower rotation times, clunkier mechanics, and less accessible damage boosts. They also scale off different stats from Verena, so there's no ability to share echoes across their teams unless you like having dead stats. When you need at least 3 teams of 9 unique characters to complete the Tower of Adversity, what this means is that a lot of players have had no choice but to invest in supports that they might not enjoy playing. In the present, 4-star support picks like Baizha are a high priority to invest in, but the second that a limited support character releases, that priority will quickly disappear. It's a problem built by scarcity, and the only hope that we have when it comes to fixing this is the release of more limited sustains. However, it's also fair to say that many players don't like pulling for sustain units. There's a reason why their banners always end up performing badly compared to DPS characters. So if you're a player who falls into that boat, wear your level 80 or 90 Baizha with pride. I'll be keeping her at 40 until the end of time. Overall, 4-star characters have some issues. Some, like the main DPS problem, don't feel like they have any solution at all. Others, like the supports, have a problem that will soon arrive with new character releases. Others, like the sub DPS characters, look to be the most useful out of the entire roster in the present and in the long-term future as well. We should just be glad that most of the 4-star characters in the game serve this sub DPS role. Hopefully, this overview was helpful in highlighting the future longevity of the 4-star cast. Many of them have to be designed in a way that leads to their eventual replacement down the road. That's just how gacha games work. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.